Hey guys, Harv here, and welcome back to the Jool System, the show in which we take tourists out on a trip to the Jool System. At the moment though, it's not really at the tourism stage. We're basically trying to set up a space program up in that system, because we didn't really get much done in the first episode, apart from talking about what the series is actually going to be like, such as boating on Laythe and hopping around on Bop and, you know, all different tourist attractions and whatnot. That's the driving force of the series. But yeah, we just delivered a probe, and we also have a empty fuel tank and an engine there. I'm hoping someday that we can, you know, kind of use all these assets we've got out there, but at the moment, it seems like we're just going to keep on adding to the useless parts. So, we've got a probe and we've got a fuel tank. Now, what I'd like to do is send some fuel there, because, you know, before we send out any actual mission utilities and whatnot, we want to make sure that they don't just run out of fuel. So having as much fuel there as possible seems like a fairly good thing to aim for. And there's a lot of testing going on, because obviously we want to establish how the series is really going to work. So that means we basically need to try out different concepts, different ideas. And the first thing that I've done before several times, I basically do it now whenever I go on a mission that requires more than one launch to Jool, and that's launching more than one craft into the same window. Because if you have a launch window, it will pass within a certain amount of time, and the time it takes for you to time warp all the way out to Jool to get that one craft there, the window is long gone for any other craft, and they have to, you know, time warp Jool again to get into another inclination, which is like another year for the Kerbals. So we're going to try with as many crafts as possible in the series. Today though, just to prove the concept. And as well as that, we are going to take the idea of just using the launch stage a bit further. Now, what I wanted to do was give the main body a more efficient engine, slightly more efficient. Doesn't have to be massively more efficient. Just the HOCgaming skipper engine, and then that was it. That was my idea. Just, you know, have that and have the main body, and by the time it gets there and does the rendezvous, it should have enough fuel left over for it to be worth it. But then I kind of forget about that idea for some reason, and I go ahead and put a payload on it. Now, the payload itself is actually useless. Oh no, useful stuff. It's not useless. It's useful stuff. Stuff that we're going to need further in the series later on. Such as, if past me will hurry up with the building, electricity. Yeah, we're going to need electricity. Come on. We're going to need... Come on. Show us. Liquid tanks. That's a fuel tank, RV. No, we need liquid tanks. Where is it? There we go. Liquid fuel, jet fuel. Because we are going to be needing more liquid fuel than oxygen fuel in total. If we're going to be using any, jet engines on Laythe and on boats and planes and whatnot, we are going to need some jet fuel. Now, we could just take that from the normal liquid oxygen and liquid hydrogen tanks, you know, the regular fuel tanks, because they do have both oxidizer and liquid fuel. But that creates a bit of an imbalance, you know. We'll end up with way too much oxidizer, and I don't know, it probably would be easier to do that, but I'm just thinking ideas, thinking for the best. So liquid fuel, and more importantly, way more importantly, RCS. We're going to need RCS fuel, and we're definitely going to need it coming up soon when we're doing a lot of dockings with stations and things. But yeah, that is the fuel delivery Mark 1, basically. And we're just testing it out. So it's not going to work particularly well, I can tell you that right now, because I've not put any intermediate stage on, I've put a very heavy payload, and not using a massively efficient engine. So the fuel delivery Mark 2, which is what I'm building now, is going to be a bit different. Instead of using a HOCgaming or even a skipper, we are going to be using something a bit more efficient, say an aerospike. No, say some nuclear engines. They sound a bit more better. They sound better. Because an aerospike would be a fairly good idea, but I'm wanting to test the high and the end range, which is, you know, the low efficiency skipper engines to get the mission done quickly, or the high efficiency nuclear engines to get the mission done over a year of burning. But you know, it's probably worth it in terms of fuel saved. Now, I'm actually not going to put any massive payload on this, just need some reaction wheels to do some turning. Cool how you actually start needing them now. Now that it's possible to turn these big ships a bit quicker, it's so useful to have reaction wheels. just essentially give you more torque if you don't already know. But yeah, that's the Fuel Delivery Mark II, replacing the Rockomax engine with 3 nuclear or atomic motors, because in the description they're actually called atomic rocket motors, I believe. And those are our 2 craft for today. The Fuel Delivery Mark 1s and 2s. We're going to launch the Mark II first. Now, the way the multiple craft launch into the same window thing works, it's not exactly a new innovation. I'm kind of making it out to be, ooh, big thing. It's just, yeah, you launch 2 crafts on the same window, it's obvious. But fact is that we have to control 1 at a time, so it makes swapping around sometimes a bit confusing. But we're going to launch the Mark II first to get it into an orbit, then launch the Mark I, put it on its trajectory, and then swap back to the Mark II and put it on its trajectory. That way things happen. So we're going to get this thing into orbit. I'm going to reach over here. Oh crap. Okay, I'll make do, it's fine. And yeah, so you know what I was saying in the previous episode? I was talking about how there was a bit where we dropped a pair of fuel tanks on this launch stage, and they didn't quite crash into the ground, but they didn't quite make it into orbit. Well, it turns out, quite by coincidence, they just so happened to be right there. That was literally one of the fuel tanks that just whizzed by us. And that is the biggest coincidence I've probably ever had in the KSB. Never seen that on the map, like there's no way to see it on the map, so it wasn't subconscious launching, you know, rendezvous kind of launch timing. Nope, it happened to be there. Really weird. And if you think about it as well, that has been in orbit. I mean, it hasn't actually been deorbiting, it has been within the atmosphere in its orbit technically, but it hasn't been slowing down because we've been time warping to Jool and not paying any attention to it, so the physics haven't been calculated. But so after all that, it's still there, and it just so happens to come to the point where it would just shoot past us. And that was pretty low down as well, that was quite far down in the atmosphere. Yes, so I just thought that was interesting. You may not all be as shocked as I was. But there we go. So we have the Fuel Delivery Mark II. I'm just going to call it the Mark II because saying the Fuel Delivery every time is just going to be a bit redundant. So the Mark II is now in orbit. We need to launch the Mark I, which is right there. Replace the Rockomax engine with the Skipper version. So not particularly efficient, but more efficient than the Rockomax. And if we didn't have this payload, we should have really done it the opposite way around. We should have put this payload on the nuclear one, because we know the nuclear ones are going to be able to make it. It's got so much efficiency. It's just going to take a longer time. Oh well, I guess we are testing things, so it doesn't really matter. Yeah, so launching this. The launch with the nuclear engines was so slow. I'd forgotten how much I really relied on every single Rockomax. Usually have 5 in the equation, only had 4, and 3 rubbish nuclear engines. Having the Skipper is a bit closer to the same amount of thrust, so it doesn't really make that much of a difference. And it's lighter, so that makes up for things. But there we go, drop the first pair. Leaning over. Oh no, that was actually the first pair of engines, I suppose. The first pair was actually a drop tank that we dropped quite early on. Get into an orbit, and if we've timed this right, by the time we get up out of the atmosphere into our apoapsis, we should be about on the opposite side of Kerbal to the Sun. And we are, pretty much. So we can burn prograde almost immediately. Just time up a little bit, and then start burning prograde immediately. And we can burn prograde and get into our thing. So we detach those engines, and they do actually go on a collision course, which is lucky. We don't want them orbiting again, and doing potentially the same thing that happened to the other ones. That would be funny. If I load up the next time I'm recording, where I load it up and I just see that debris falling past me, that would be hilarious. But yeah, so now we're burning for our Jool capture. Going into interplanetary space, pay attention to how fast the Skipper engine is working. See how big that's expanding. I mean, it's running at 4 times speed at the moment in the editor, but that is going pretty fast compared to what we'll see in a few minutes. And we get our encounter just about... Well, we will get our encounter, don't worry. There we go. Excuse me. Got to do a bit of an inclination change. I think Jool does actually orbit around the ecliptic, but it's something about our transfer orbit which is actually making it always need to go south or something. Needing to burn a bit south. And there, so we've sent one mission out on the way to Jool. And the second mission is right here. Now we've set up a maneuver node to get a capture. And now we need to try and burn. It's giving us an estimated burn time of 15 minutes. And if I were to split that in half like I usually do, get roughly, 7 minutes before and 7 minutes after of burning, I think I'd probably end up pointing too far down and actually re-enter the atmosphere. So I've left it till 2 minutes beforehand, and as a result the orbit's going to be a bit skewed? Is that, yeah? Ski with? I can't even remember. You may have heard it in my voice. I've got a really bad cold. And it's not actually a cold, it's hay fever, because I've ran out of hay fever tablets. I'm trying to look for a tissue desperately and quickly do it without anyone noticing, but it's too late because I've already talked about it now. But there's actually no tissues in my room either, so I've run out of hay fever tablets and I've run out of tissues. This is incredibly annoying. And it's not a simple matter just to stop the record or pause the recording and carry on, Well, okay, technically it is. But I'd rather not. I'd rather to do this all in one sitting so I don't forget what I'm talking about. Then again, whilst I'm doing everything in one sitting, I always forget what I'm talking about. So it really wouldn't make a difference, would it? I'll be right back. It's alright guys, I've located tissues. Don't worry. I haven't found hay fever tablets, but the tissues kind of put off needing that anyway, so yeah. What are we doing? Missions and rockets and stuff and maths. Alright, so we've put our 2 ships on a trajectory. Wow, I feel much better. Who would have thought blowing your nose would really make you feel better, but it does. So yeah, we've got 2 rockets on the trajectory. One is coming in roughly 50 days earlier than the other. So that's the one we're working on now, and that's the Mark 1 with the skipper engine that we launched second. And Mark 2 is going to come 50 days later and get into counter, by which time we've already basically done the entire mission. So let's work on doing that now. Warp it in, bringing the probe down. Now the idea is to do a rendezvous with the space station. The thing is, at the moment, there is no space station. It's a probe and an empty fuel tank, so I might as well have put it into its own orbit for all really mattered. And unfortunately, what assets we do have around Jool, such as the probe and the empty fuel tank, aren't even in an equatorial orbit. So yeah, basically it's going to take a lot of fuel to rendezvous with one of them, and which I don't really know yet. I mean, I could go with the probe, but the probe's a probe, and it can kind of go where it likes and has kind of its own mission. It's not really supposed to be part of a space station. Or I could go with the empty fuel tank and do nothing. Because docking, really? You think I'm going to be able to dock with that using these 2 big ships, one of which I can't steer because the empty fuel tank's also got no electricity. So yeah, it's kind of just like, hey guys, we've got fuel. Oh, there's no one to give it to. Well, I'll just put it somewhere, and I'll end up basically ejecting it all into the vacuum of space. So I'm definitely going to try and rendezvous with one of them, because I thought I might as well. I kind of feel obliged to, seeing as we're here and they're here. So swap to it, and we want to change our maneuver node. Now the maneuver nodes were in the worst possible place. Actually, no, they weren't in the worst possible place. They were in the worst possible place. They were both at low points in the orbit, meaning that, we're travelling very fast at the time we need to do our inclination change, which means that we end up using a lot more fuel than we would do otherwise. Look at that, oxidizer, 528 litres left, or units left. Is it litres? Is it litres or is it mass? Or are they the same thing? No, litres is volume. I'm not entirely sure what the units stand for there. It doesn't really matter, because it's not being used in interface with reality, so unless we're doing calculations, which I don't really care for fuel calculations, I don't know what you would use that for. It's all about the delta V, rocket equations. So, we've changed the inclination, we're on the same ecliptic, plane, and now we're going to go for a rendezvous. But I've forgotten a few things, right? And that's how rendezvousing works. Actually, no, that's later. Sorry, spoilers. Yeah, so we're trying to burn down, and we run out of fuel. Trying to settle down to orbit so we could get a rendezvous at close approach, and we get nowhere near. So we've got this payload, which we need. It's got RCS fuel, which is quite valuable out here, as is any type of fuel, really. We've got the RCS fuel, and it's now stuck on an orbit way out. Luckily not actually near enough to Laythe to be captured into a Laythe orbit, I hope. Shouldn't be. But yeah, it's kind of a bit far out. I mean, when we get shuttles down here and we get these light crafts, we'll be able to pull it back in and they'll be fine. But for now, it's a bit of a nuisance. So it's basically gone. We can't really use it. And but what we can do is try and use our second mission, which is the Mark II with its nuclear efficient engines, and we can use it to try and rendezvous with something. Now, so we get in and we need to slow down into a capture. Where we'd normally aerobrake, we decide to use our fuel for some reason, or lithobrake, depending on which one actually is. We decide to use our fuel, get slowed down into a orbit around Jool, and come on now, you know you want to do it. Come on, slow down. Bit of boring footage, and my voice just went. I'm thinking I may need another tissue. Luckily I've got one here. Problem is, I really don't have to keep on pausing this. Makes it kind of disjointed. Not that, as I pointed out earlier, my rambling isn't disjointed to begin with, so I suppose it doesn't really matter. But yeah. I've had microphone problems recently. There's nothing to talk about on screen. Come on, we're burning. Yes, we're burning. Well done. And yeah, I've had microphone problems recently. My microphone input keeps on changing itself by itself. I don't know why, and it's really annoying when you're trying to play Dota, because it means that either the input is way too high and it sounds like you're shouting at your friends, or the input is way too low and they can't hear when you say, "Oh my god, I'm being attacked," or middle's missing, or, you know, vital information like that. My little rant over. We need to get into our inclination, or we need to change our inclination. We need to match it up with our target crafts, and luckily this node is right out of the apoapsis, meaning we're travelling very slow when we change, which means it's easier to change it, so it uses a lot less fuel. Now, on the same plane, we can set a maneuver node down at the periapsis to bring an encounter in. Unfortunately, the only straight encounter we could get is from this maneuver, and you may think, oh great, that's awesome if we do a bit of adjusting, 3.9 kilometer separation, so that's fine, right? We can just get 3.9 kilometers away, slow down, and then burn towards it. Well, we're using very weak engines, and we're coming from a higher orbit. Look at this. When we slow down, as we do our burn about now, there we go, you can see where our target orbit is. It's just out of the reach, or just ahead and above, of the Mark II, or the Mark I, which failed its mission and ran out of fuel. So it's just above that, which means relative speed, relative velocity at the periapsis is actually kind of big. So we get an intersect. It's flashing around, which makes it really annoying, but we do get an intersect. There we go, 4.2 kilometers. And we warp round. Now 1.5 kilometers, very close intersect. Warp it all the way round, and as we come in for the periapsis, we go on our nav ball and we swap over the target to target. Oh, look at that! 1,100 meters per second relative velocity difference. Which means we have to expend 1,000 meters per second of change in velocity, delta V. Which means that we're going to have a lot less fuel. And also I didn't start burning early enough. So we burn, we desperately try and slow down, and we sail basically right past the closest approach, intercept point, and we end up having to get a different rendezvous. But there we go, 800 meters per second to go, 700, this is life I'm afraid, 600 meters per second, 500 meters per second, and yeah, it carries on like that. So thinking for the future, because I'm going to record the footage for the next one immediately after finishing this commentating. That's how fast I'm doing it. I'm just doing it really quickly before I go back, come off holiday and don't have as much time. But yeah, so thing next to do, I think, is to take a tug, consolidate all our asses. A tug is basically a small craft which can move bigger crafts around and dock them together for it. So we're going to take something small as one of the launchers. Probably end up doing 3 launchers. One launcher do that, move everything together and just get it docked together so it's not on a different orbit. And we'll might even send some crew. We might send some Kerbals for the first mission, or for the third mission, you know, third episode. But yeah, so we're coming up to the end. We have got into a rendezvous, we are now sailing towards our target, and unfortunately our target is probably the thing it really doesn't need to be. We're just wasting fuel for no reason, basically, because we get here with, okay, another big tank. Great. Can I dock onto it? No, because I've got no RCS and no RCS thrusters. So, what am I going to do? Well, I'll leave it here and hope it stays near it. Not going to work. They're in slightly different orbits, and after a lot of time warp, they're going to be very, very far apart. Oh, but hang on! The probe has RCS, and the probe has RCS thrusters. So, maybe we can use the probe as a space tug. Well, no, because it hasn't got the right type of docking ports to dock onto the ends, and it's the ends that we kind of need if we're going to be docking things together for it. So, it can dock onto the sides. That's good, you know. It can do that at the expense of using all its RCS fuel. Is it really worth it? I don't know. We can try. I suppose there's no harm in trying. We might as well try and move things closer together whilst we can. So, you know, that's what I'm aiming for. Trying to put everything in the same space before I expand outwards. And putting the probe, docking it back onto one of these fuel tanks is probably the way to do that. So, slowly burning, slowly using up all of that RCS. Trying to get a rendezvous, a closest approach point. Turns out RCS and 4 times time acceleration don't go well together. Who would have thunk it? But there we go. And closest approach, that red marker, probably the yellow one actually, is right there. 7.2, 5, 3, 2, 0.2, 0.5. Had 0.2 for a second there. 0.5 kilometers. Probably just as well that I didn't have 0.2, because again, yet again, I'm not going to burn early enough. I'm going to forget that I have to traverse almost 300 meters per second delta V using RCS jets, which is going to take a lot longer than a minute. And start burning, desperately trying to burn and cancel out the relative velocity, and yet we end up sailing pretty much right past it. So yeah, not an awful lot done today, really. We have got fuel. I guess mission accomplished as in we have got fuel there. The fuel delivery Mark 1, which is what we're going to dock with, or the Mark 2, has got over 1 big grey tank of fuel. If I just refine the design further, we'll be able to get quite a bit of fuel here. Next episode, going to be Laythe breaking. We're going to be sending out a tug, putting everything together into one space station conglomeration. I like that word. Space station conglomeration. It sounds cool. And yeah. And as the third mission, we'll probably be doing something else. I don't know. We'll think about it. Maybe another probe. Maybe the first landing on Laythe. I don't know. Actually, no. We need an orbital space station around Kerbal. That's what we want. Yeah, we'll work on that. Because there's also going to be a tourist resort just in orbit. And that is pretty much the end. We're going to swap to a camera view. And we're going to desperately try and dock with that thing, which has got some fuel left in it, but it hasn't got any RCS fuel. And we've only got 27 units left, so 27 units of fuel, is that enough to dock with this? 24, 23 units of fuel. Setting the reticule. And for some reason my key bindings seem utterly out of place. And I realise what it is just too late. Or not really too late, you know, just in time. I was looking the wrong way. Now looking the right way, it's a bit of a doddle just to move over here, settle on one of the target docking ports. If we can orient ourselves to point towards it, there we go. and we can bring in our probe after its long voyage by itself all around Jool. Hopefully it's collected a lot of scientific data, not that there really was much to collect, and there we go. Ooh, we should drop a probe into the atmosphere, shouldn't we? Yes, that's what we should do. We should make an atmospheric Jool probe. And there we go. Thank you very much for watching this episode, the second episode of the Jool system. We're going to be building things bigger and better as we go along, so don't go anywhere until the next episode. And yeah, thank you very much for watching. If you liked the video, please do like the video, and I shall see you all next time.